You started your Pokemon journey. You've kissed your ever supportive mother goodbye, and you haven't seen your deadbeat father in years, because for some reason Pokemon has made it a point, except for in a few occasions, to give you one of those in the first place. But you are now on your way to the local professor's lab to pick your forever friend, knowing though that you will have 5 available slots on your team outside of that, with the goal of becoming the best that ever was, the champion of your region, and world champion in real life. How is one supposed to determine who the best fit for its original partner is? Today, we are going to be going over the basics of team building as it pertains to the official video game championships format of 2v2. Let's get right into it. So you have a few options on how to build your team, a few archetypes, a few metas, if you will, starting with hyper offensive. Now, which gambling style fits you best? Are we going to go all in every single hand? Because who cares about life-altering debt? This can help you win battles quicker, put constant damage pressure out there, and make the opponent have to make the most of every single turn, because before you know it, the battle can be over. This does, however, make it harder to come from behind. Each one of these styles will have its own pros and cons. Moving on to the next, if you control the speed, you control the flow of battle, you control the battle itself. With moves like Tailwind and Trick Room, well, congrats, you've learned how to count cards and put the odds into your favor. This is speed control without needing to worry an overabundance about your EVs and IVs, but we'll get into those later as well. Now, maybe you're a person who craves balance in their life. It's smart, but you could be overrun by people who are a bit more confident in themselves that have built their team around more specific strategies. So while this does give you a bit of coverage everywhere, you're a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And of course, you can finish off by being somebody who likes to set up. Moves such as Swords Dance, Dragon Dance, Nasty Plot, and Calm Mind can help you become unstoppable. But you will need a teammate to take the heat off of the star of the show to begin to set up with moves like Follow Me, Wide Guard, and Fake Out. And you can be heavily reliant on that setup and can be swept if those are unallowed, if the other team has moves like Taunt, Fake Out, Encore, Spore, etc. So now we've gone over a few of the archetypes and how they're able to benefit and also hurt you on the battlefield. Let's get into different types of Pokemon usage. So here we're seeing our lovely friend, the customer support Indeedee, able to cure any issue that you may have on the battlefield, starting with our first type of Pokemon, the support Pokemon. These are meant to buff or keep your allies alive. They usually have a bit of a higher defensive stat, HP at their base, but can also still deal damage if needed. It's just not what they prefer to do. With moves like Follow Me or Rage Powder, Helping Hand, Wide Guard, you are able to make sure that the star of the show is not center stage until they need to be. Other Pokemon examples of this could be Amoonguss, Incineroar with abilities like Intimidate and the like. Moving on to our next style of Pokemon, we have your Wall. And for this example, we are going to show the beefiest of them all. The Pokemon with literally a shield as a face, Zamazenta. These Pokemon tend to have higher defensive HP stats, and they want to sit on the field as long as humanly possible. These can also be Pokemon to mitigate the idea of having a few lesser points in your defensive stats that just have a naturally good typing into a lot of matchups that they may go against. Zamazenta happens to be the perfect example, as its typing and its raw stats lend to it staying on the field for as long as possible. Another example of this can be Blissey, where it is much more geared towards specially defensive abilities rather than physical, but Zamazenta we're going to stick with as it tends to cover both. The next style of fighting that you'll see are your wall breakers, and for this we're showing Urshifu Rapid Strike. These Pokemon tend to have a higher coverage in their move sets. We'll see here that we have moves like Aqua Jet and Surging Strikes, which deal big water type damage. We also are covering our dark types, our normal types with moves like Close Combat, and Ice Spinner to take away things like terrains or deal with the pesky flying types that may want to take advantage of our fighting type. So again, they'll have the higher coverage and movesets. They tend to have a stronger base attack set so that they do not have to rely on stat boosting moves, but they can use them. They just prefer not to rely on them. They prioritize power over speed with abilities like Huge Power, Sheer Force, or in our case, Unseen Fist, which makes sure that our Urshifu is able to hit through anything, including Pokemon that are trying to use the move Protect. They're often not as frail as sweepers, but they still can be taken out in a few hits. They just wish to break through the Pokemon like we were showing earlier, Zamazenta. Other examples of this could be Miraidon, Shiyu. It's really dealer's choice. Next up, everybody's favorite, my personal favorite as a hyper offensive style player, your sweepers. And for this, we are going to be showing Fluttermane. These are going to be the fastest Pokemon on the field, with the idea of giving your opponent zero chance to ever gain or swing the momentum, as they should be fainted the very turn that they hit the field. At least that's the designed goal. Usually you will run boosting moves like Swords Dance to guarantee one-hit KOs. In our case, we are using Fluttermane with its booster energy held item that is going to boost its highest stat by either 1.3x if it's anything except the speed, or 1.5x if it is that speed. So you want these Pokemon to hit the field and be ready to deal as maximum amount of damage as possible, or take one turn to set up and do the same thing. With the caveat that these Pokemon tend to be extremely frail, your glass cannons, if you will, so you want to have something supportive next to it to make sure that it doesn't have to face adversity for as long as possible. Other examples of this can be Pokemon like Sneasler or Gengar. And last, we have our restricted Pokemon, going right back to our friend Zamazenta. These are your legendaries or your mythicals, with mythicals having their first allowance into the VGC in the next regulation of Pokemon Scarlet Violet, Regulation J. Sub-legendaries do not count, so your Articunos and Moltres, your Raikous, Suicunes, they are allowed on the team with no restrictions at all. Again, these are for more so your box legendaries and your mythicals. If you want to find a full list of those, feel free to look at Smogon, Bulbapedia, or Cerebi, wherever you want to get your Pokemon information. Depending on the current regulation being used in the VGC, you'll see an allowance of anywhere from 0 to 2 of these Pokemon at a time. So again, we're using Zamazenta as one of them. We would be allowed in the current regulation to have one more. Next up, let's go over a few ways to control the flow of battle with your choices in team building. Next, let's talk about speed control, because as always, if you control the flow of battle, you control the battle itself. With moves like Tailwind, Icy Wind, Trick Room, and Thunder Wave, you're able to significantly swing that flow of battle in your direction. All of these moves in one way or another will either help you gain a speed boost or slow down your opponents to a crawl. Next, let's talk about terrain advantages. Each one of these will set a unique advantage for your side of the field. Now, the important thing to remember with terrains is that it will only affect grounded Pokemon. So any flying types or any Pokemon with the ability Levitate will not be affected by the following. You'll usually want at least one terrain on your team to counter your opponents, because again, these are honestly pretty powerful abilities that can swing momentum heavily without even having to use a move. First up, we have our electric terrain. This is able to help avoid Amoonguss Spore. It boosts the mostly unresisted electric type attacks. It will boost those attacks by 1.3x while making sure that no Pokemon on the field that is grounded is able to fall asleep. Next up, we have the psychic terrain, making the battlefield get a little bit strange, a little bit weird. This will help you avoid priority attacks. Things like Fake Out, things like Sucker Punch and Extreme Speed now will no longer be able to affect the opponents, while still allowing for moves like Helping Hand to affect your own teammates. This will help make setups easier, setting Trick Room easier, and again, will allow you to conjure up some movesets that aren't solely reliant on having those priority type attacks. We have grassy terrain. Soothe your soul by touching a little bit of grass. Heal your Pokemon at the end of every single turn by 1/16 of their health. And it even has the added benefit of making moves like Grassy Glide have a +1 priority while boosting its power by 1.3 times its initial. And last, we have our Misty Terrain, which is the most difficult one to set up at the moment, as there are no Pokemon that have the ability Misty Surge currently in Scarlet Violet. But if you want to choose this ability, you will now have access to not having any status effects being able to afflict you at all, while also dropping dragon type attacks by 50%. Let's move back and learn a bit more about movesets. So we're going to use the Bob Ross of the Pokemon world here to explain a bit more about movesets. For anybody who is unaware, we're using Smeargle because he is able to learn any move in the game, except now Dark Void. Thank you to the Big Six team from back in 2016 or 17. Only Darkrai can learn that move because it turns out that being able to put both Pokemon to sleep on the other side was a bit game breaking, but that's okay. So you want to make sure that you have a good variety in your movesets, starting with your non-damaging moves like Spore and Stealth Rock. Spore will help you in a supportive manner by putting a Pokemon on the other side to sleep, and Stealth Rock is a field hazard that anytime a Pokemon comes out on the opposing side, they will take type resistant, boosted, or neutral damage to a rock type attack. This can help mitigate things like Focus Sashes or the ability Sturdy by doing a little bit of chip damage to a Pokemon that hits the field every time it comes out. Next up, we have our damaging moves. You want to make sure not to overload on spread moves such as our friend Explosion here, because spread moves can be stopped by Wide Guard. So if that's all you have, Wide Guard being an attack that can be used every single turn that a Pokemon wants to use it, you would be completely negated from doing any damage at all. So make sure you have a good mix of spread moves and single target moves. And understand the concept of stab, or same type attack bonus. So our Smeargle being a normal type, Explosion being a normal type move, Smeargle now gains a 50% boost into anything that it uses that is also a normal type. Again, you don't want to only use stab moves, even though they will be more powerful on those Pokemon. Find the right set that works best for you. Next, let's talk about the concept of EVs and IVs, or effort values and individual values. The way that these work is, if you'll look at Smeargle here, as you put more EVs into a Pokemon, its stats will rise or drop if you're taking them away. And same thing with IVs. The more you put into it or the more you take away, your raw stat will be affected. How do these calculate? Pretty simply, to be honest. At level 100, every 4 EVs that you put into an individual stat will equate to that stat being raised by 1. And at level 100, every 1 IV that you put into a stat will also raise that individual stat by 1. Now, of course, we're worried about the VGC here, where everything is lowered down to level 50. What does that mean for the calculations? Well, it only changes them a little bit. For effort values, or our EVs, the first stat increase will be determined by the first 4 EVs that you put into it. After that, every subsequent stat raise, you will have to apply 8 EVs into that to get an additional boost. So at level 50, the first 4 EVs for the first stat boost, and 8 for every additional. And for IVs, it is much simpler, where at level 50, every IV that you put into a Pokemon will be a 0.5 stat boost. How do you gain EVs? Well, it's pretty simple. It is determined by things such as your HP ups, your proteins, your irons, all of those vitamins that can raise it. You can go and fight wild Pokemon that give certain effort values into it. You have a total of 510, realistically 508 that could be applied, and 252 can be the max value that you can put into one stat, as you'll see with our friend Smeargle over here. So those are determined and can be switched through items throughout the game, whereas your IVs are set as soon as you catch or hatch a Pokemon. These can be increased by way of hyper training within the games, but they can never be decreased. So if you ever want a Pokemon that has lesser IVs for things like Trick Room to slow it down, or have a lower attack so that moves like Foul Play will affect you less, you will have to breed appropriately and figure out a method to make sure that those are lower at the initial conception of that Pokemon. Next up, another way that we are able to change up our stat a little bit is through nature. So you can't see it actually because apparently it doesn't want to show it, but we're going to pick the adamant nature. Now, every nature will raise one stat by 10% of its initial value and lower another one by 10%. There are, of course, natures in here that will do neutral to absolutely everything, but as far as competitive battling goes, you will almost never see that. So these are a bit complementary to your EVs and IVs. So we'll see here, the one that I chose will raise our Smeargle's attack by 10% and lower its special attack by 10%. So pick the nature that synergizes with your stats the most. Now, some Pokemon may already have a high enough raw stat that you don't necessarily need to pump all of it into its main stat. So for our Smeargle, for example, we will want everything into speed and HP because we don't need it to have a great attack. We want it to be super fast and stay on the field for as long as it can. So again, just kind of figure out the set that works best for you. What is the next thing we want to consider? Well, that is choosing and covering the meta. How are we going to choose and cover our meta? Well, here you'll see some of the top Pokemon that are used currently in the VGC. Higher level teams, as you get higher up in the rankings and the ELOs, tend to have a few more commonly seen things. Now, you should always have these in mind and cover them, but you shouldn't directly counter them. Still have counter for the non-meta teams, because if you are only accounting for things like a Miraidon and Lunala, well, you leave a vulnerability to every other pairing in the game. Think about using Pokemon that are lesser used but still pretty viable. Now again, the meta is the meta for a reason, but you could try more personalized options based on your own battle style. Find the best fits for your individual teams. For example, you could have a Necrozma Dawnwings instead of the more traditional Lunala. You could have an Indeedee over Farigiraf, a Talonflame or a Roaring Moon for Tailwind purposes over Tornadus. The list goes on and on. The next thing we'll want to talk about, another complementary aspect to your Pokemon, is the item that it is holding. There are a plethora of items that you can choose here, all with varying effects. You have your stat boosting items, such as all of the choice items we see here that will boost an individual stat by 1.5x at the cost of needing to lock into the very first move that you choose. More stat boosting items such as the Life Orb, which will increase all of your attacks by 1.3x, while you'll lose 10% of your health every time you attack. And the Assault Vest, which will boost your special defense by 50%, but you can only use damaging moves. Moving on to more protection-based items, we have the Focus Sash here, which as long as you are at full HP, you can never be one-shot. You will be left with 1 health every single time. You have your Safety Goggles, if I could learn how to type, which makes the holder immune to powder moves such as Spore and Rage Powder, and damage from Sandstorm and Hail. And lastly, our Covert Cloak, which means that the holder is no longer affected by the secondary effects of any moves. So that's your air slash flinches, your fake out flinches, and so on. Last, let's go over a few held items that could be used in more of an assistant role, such as our Eject Pack or our Eject Button, which if the user survives a hit or has a stat lowered, they are switching out of battle. Whoever had the Pokemon that has to switch out will then choose its replacement. And the Rocky Helmet, which if the holder is hit by a contact move, so not just a physical move, but a move that is listed as making contact with its opponent, the attacker will lose 1/6 of its maximum HP. Now, what is the next thing we want to take into consideration? Well, that is how we're going to control the flow of battle. Think about how you'll want this play and its different acts to be presented to your audience. Now, you have the opening. Once the curtain is drawn, what is the first thing that people are going to see? You want to gain the audience's attention, or in this case, the flow of battle, as quickly as possible with things like Prankster Tailwind to double your Pokemon's speed the very first turn of the match, or on the reverse end, something like Trick Room if you expect your opponent to also want to dominate the speed and the flow of battle. You'll have moves like Rage Powder that can help you set up or start damage immediately, taking the attraction off of the star of your show. You'll have things such as controlling the weather and the terrain, a few things that we have gone over in other videos. Which combination of your Pokemon synergize the best for you to do this? And of course, as the flow of battle will continue to go on, you will want to think about how your late game is going to look. How are you going to get revenge knockouts? Are you going to have Pokemon that are already set up, or those who don't require any setup at all? So that way, as Pokemon have been chip damaged throughout, maybe your opponent no longer has their ace damage dealer. How are you going to make sure that you can seal the victory? Think of things like type matchups that your openers tend to struggle with, and let the flow of battle dictate who you save for last. It's good to have a script, but you don't always have to stick to it. If the other team is speedy, maybe save your Trick Room user for later in the match. If the other team is slow, maybe save your speedsters and your taunt users. With all of this in mind, hopefully you are able to build a team that synergizes within itself to produce the most likely outcome that we all want. That, of course, being the sweet, sweet taste of victory. Now, in other videos, I'm going to go over maybe an example team or two, but hopefully this has given you enough information to start your journey to become, again, the best that ever was. If you enjoyed this, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. It helps out a lot. I'll be coming out with more videos in relation to how you can up your game in the Pokemon Video Game Championship series. And for now, love you all, and we'll see you guys next time.